you. Good afternoon, everyone. Jessica, thank you for that soothing lead-in music. Welcome, everyone, to the first Teamwork for Transformative Care Affinity Group meeting of 2026. Hope everyone had a great holiday season. And today, we are getting our year off to an amazing start. I'd like to thank and welcome Dr. Michael Alice Moga from Stanford Children's Hospital, who will be presenting to us today. Dr. Moga is the medical director of the Pediatric Cardiovascular ICU at Stanford Children's. She is board certified in pediatrics, critical care, and cardiology. Dr. Moga also has a Master of Science in Healthcare Quality and Patient Safety from Northwestern University and a global MBA from the University of Toronto. So obviously she loves education and educating. And if you have heard her speak before, which I have, her passion for improvement, safety, and quality is very evident. So you are in for a great presentation today. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Dr. Moga.
Great. Thanks so much, Joe. And thanks everyone for joining me at this kind of noontime hour for a talk about meetings, which to get people excited about meetings is actually a really difficult thing to do these days. And I never thought that I would develop kind of a passion for it as well. But I think it's one of the key ways that as teams, we actually come together and create something really special and be able to function better together. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen here and we can get on with it. And I do appreciate, first of all, that you did start the meeting on time, which is a fantastic start, to be honest with you. So to kind of jump in here, we have three main learning objectives for today, which is first, understanding the current state of our workplace meetings and how we can improve them, and then identify some very key meeting best practices, and then opportunities to practically apply these to our current team meetings. And then I'm going to finish with talking about this concept of facilitation and what facilitators could do to help improve our team meetings. I do have some disclosures. I do reluctantly go to meetings almost every day. And hopefully, fewer days than that, I run meetings that others reluctantly attend. And I am a trained emergent facilitator. And so, if anyone wants to learn more about that, I would love to talk to you about it. So, most of you probably have access to your work calendar right now, or you can picture it in your mind. And I bet many of you have a calendar that looks pretty much like the one up here on this screen. And if you are one of those people, you are absolutely not alone. Modern day knowledge workers, of which we fall into that category, most of us, spend up to 60 to 85% of their time in meetings. And this has only escalated in the most recent years, in that time spent in meetings has risen by 8 to 10% annually since 2010. You'd think, well, if we're all in meetings, we must love being in meetings then, since we're devoting so much of our time to them. That is actually completely untrue. Surveys show that people would rather do some fairly noxious things rather than go to a meeting. 60% of people would rather go to a doctor's appointment, and I think that's not a comment on how wonderful doctor appointments are, but on how bad meetings are. A quarter of people would rather sit in traffic, and almost 1 in 5 people would rather attend jury duty than attend their daily meetings. But when you do attend the meeting, what do you do? Well, first of all, to get you to go to a meeting in the first place, especially if it's in person, feeding people is the number one way to get people to go to an in-person meeting. So you can see then how this virtual world that we live in, sometimes not having that carrot makes it difficult to go to a meeting. But when you do go, you're actually not doing what we think we should be doing during meetings. About 40% of people daydream during meetings. I was shocked by this, that about 90% of people have actually slept at some point during a meeting. 73% of people multitask, And almost everyone has missed a meeting at some point or another. Now, when you do go and you know what you're doing, we actually also, not only do we not do what we should be doing, but we get annoyed by what other people are doing as well. I found it fascinating that one of the biggest meeting irritations for a quarter of the people was people eating. So even though you go to get the food, apparently you're not supposed to eat the food during the meeting because you're just going to annoy people. And then you can see a lot of these habits here are kind of just basic common courtesy. People don't like it when others are taking phone calls or making texts. So again, doing that multitasking that so many people do, not listening to others, arriving late or leaving early. And then as well, people who interrupt others and people who talk about nothing for a really, really long time. I bet, yeah, I see lots of like smiles here. I bet people like you can pinpoint exactly who in your recurring meetings annoy you with these specific things. But how did we actually get here? This is actually something that's well described and it's called meeting bloat. One of the things that led us to get to this place is this fear of missing out or FOMO. And it's on both ends of the spectrum where people have started inviting others to their meeting just in case they might want to be there, just in case they might have something to contribute. And then people attend meetings not really convinced they need to be there, but I'm worried someone might say something that I might want to hear. We increasingly use meetings as a crutch, as a way to force accountability, instead of as a leader, just doing a better job of keeping track of what people on your team are doing and helping them remove barriers. Hybrid work has really escalated the meeting bloat. Leaders have started adding more meetings as a way to keep remote teams more engaged. But actually, that tends to be more counterproductive than what you would anticipate. And then there's this increasing concept of what's called feather bedding. And so people need to find ways to show how much work they're doing in order to keep their job. And people have started equating meetings with work. And so if they just create more meetings for themselves, they can then justify their job and justify and show the work that they are apparently doing. That doesn't actually pan out though. Consequences of this meeting bloat are that a large percentage of people feel that this high prevalence of meetings means they don't have enough time to actually work, which means they're not getting work done during the meetings. Poorly run meetings actually lead to more confusion when they should be adding clarity. They make teams lose focus on the projects at hand. All of these unnecessary attendees just slow down what actually has to be done. And then even afterwards, even when the meetings are over, that meeting bloat is still hangs on. There's a concept called meeting hangovers, where it's been proven that stress from bad meetings affects your ability to work later on. And a study showed that was very interesting. Once you get distracted from doing some deep kind of concentration work or doing your individual work, it takes about 25 minutes to refocus again and be able to re-engage in your work in a meaningful way. So what that essentially means is that a 30-minute meeting basically creates a 1 hour long distraction in your busy day. Now, put that all together and all told, it's enough as individuals that we feel the consequences of these poorly run meetings. But when you kind of tally it all up, not only do we not do a lot of work in the meetings, oh, and by the way, after the meetings, it prohibits us from getting back to work, but we waste a lot of time even just waiting for the meeting to start. So the average executive level meeting starts 15 minutes late, which is it just blows my mind. And actually, the higher up you go in the organization, the longer the average delay is. When you tally up that 15-minute delay for meetings over a whole year, it's 6 days in a year that people spend waiting for meetings to even start. To put that into like a more of a financial sense, you can see essentially we are paying people billions of dollars in this country and other countries every year to wait for meetings. Putting it into more of a local context, the real costs of this, and this is how we can start making arguments as to beyond team wellness, beyond productivity, what are the cost of these poorly run meetings? One study showed that in a group of people that had roughly 18 hours per week of meetings, and for most of us, that's going to be an underestimate. They actually decline 14% of these meetings, but they actually want to decline 31%. So that means they are reluctantly going to about 17% of their time is spent reluctantly going to meetings. That equates in a salary standpoint to about $25,000 per employee per year. And by the way, Stanford Healthcare has about 18,000 employees. So that means it's a waste of about $500 million a year in poorly run meetings. So what are we going to do about it? I think no one here is probably sitting here saying, wow, this does not resonate with me. Every meeting I go to is fantastically run and it invigorates me and I get to collaborate with my teammates and I wish I could just do more of it. So the first strategy is to literally just have fewer meetings. Now, this is not new. A variety of other companies and in other industries have tried to tackle things in this way. So they did it in a variety of ways. For example, Shopify in 2023 took a fairly radical step of they just canceled all of their meetings. And that, again, pretty darn radical. And so they had, yeah, I see lots of like celebrations. People are super excited by this. Um, and it was actually fairly successful. Um, you can see that, I'm sorry, I actually lost the ability to see my own slides here. So I'm just getting back to that. You can see I kind of hit this. You see, this is the problems with these meetings, to be honest with you. Um, I'm just looking at my different view. I apologize, folks. Let's see. Okay, I'm just going to bring this up on my own again. There we go. Excellent. Now we're back on track, folks. Thank you. So they did this calendar purge and freed up 300,000 hours over a year and actually delivered a quarter, 25% more projects. Now, Adam Mosseri, when he was the CEO of Instagram, took it a step further. So he made specific recommendations for bi-weekly one-on-one meetings and gave people explicit permission to decline meetings that fell within designated focus blocks for them. Recognizing that they took the purge to a whole different level because they noticed that they did one purge of recurring meetings and then people kept adding them back on again. So they would do biannual purges of their meetings as a way to get people back to do the work that they were there to do. Now, Netflix did it in a slightly different way. They created rules for their meetings. There were no meetings greater than 30 minutes, and they prohibited meetings where the only purpose was one-way information sharing. They pushed those meetings to other ways of sharing that information that didn't take up everyone's time. Now, results of this, again, fairly dramatic. They decreased meetings by over 65%, and this was a resounding success with their employees, with 85% of people in favor of these changes. The other big movement that people have tried is creating meeting-free days. And I know different entities within Stanford and within Stanford Health have tried doing this. This study showed they examined 76 companies that were fairly large and represented a wide variety of countries and saw could they designate how many meeting-free days was actually optimal. So these companies had anywhere from 2 meeting-free days to 5 meeting-free days, which meant people just kind of didn't meet at all. And then they looked and polled people on what this meant from their degree of autonomy, how it improved communication or not, cooperation, productivity, wide variety of things. And they reached the conclusion that the optimal number of meeting-free days was 3. And so that left 2 days a week to meet for two specific reasons, which are, I think, are very, very important from a team standpoint, maintaining those social connections. And then it offered these touch points and ways to manage people's weekly schedules. They needed a little bit of control and anchoring points rather than just going kind of freedom for all 5 days. Now, a lot of us don't have the ability to make these massive radical changes with purging everyone's calendars, creating all of these rules. So, what is one way that you can actually do something about it? And this is a really nice way of guiding yourself through an internal thought process of should I call a meeting about something? And it starts with, well, have I thought this through myself enough? If I have, do I actually need other people's input to make progress in this, in whatever this kind of agenda item is? If you do, does this actually need to be done real time? If it doesn't, you can send out an email. You can capitalize on these more asynchronous ways to communicate and have these types of conversations. If you do need something real time, does this need to be face to face? If not, you can do a chat, you can do a phone call, or you can do increasingly these video conferences. But if it does need to be real time, it does need to be in person, only then should you actually schedule and then, more importantly, start preparing for this in-person meeting. So let's say you've gone through this process and you're like, you know what? I actually 100% need to have this meeting with my team. What are some strategies to run better meetings for your team? It all starts actually before the meeting even happens in the first place. The number one thing you need to have is a clear purpose and objectives. Purposes for having a meeting fall into some really broad categories that you see on this slide. I would argue that some of the categories here that I included just for completeness don't actually fall into a reason to have a meeting. In particular, some of these routine meetings that are put on the books that you just have to all of a sudden start finding agenda items for. These regular routine meetings oftentimes don't even need to happen. Meetings I would advocate need to be reserved for these team building and relational connections, ideation and problem solving sessions, times when you need to make and times when you need to make decisions as a team. Before your meeting starts, how you need to prepare for this meeting is you need to match the amount of time that you schedule the meeting for to the purpose of the meeting. And I think it starts, what you should start doing is reflecting on when I call a meeting, why does my meeting actually end? Does it end because I and my team have accomplished what we set out to do? Or does it end because the time ran out? You need to really be aware of just expanding and scheduling. Well, you know what? We might need a half hour, but I'm going to schedule 45 minutes or an hour just in case. Invariably, people feel the need to expand to fill the time for which the meeting was actually scheduled. When you schedule that meeting, the meeting invite needs to specifically note what the meeting is for. And oftentimes people advocate for a more captivating invitation and description of what the meeting is to encourage people to come to it. I can't express enough the importance of the agenda. The agenda needs to be shared with people at minimum 24 hours before the meeting is called. It needs to be very, very specific and outline the topics for discussion, who's going to be leading a given topic, what time is allotted for that specific topic, and any pre-reads or pre-work that needs to be done. I find it really, really helpful to designate what the person who is leading that topic needs from that specific part of the meeting. Is this, again, information delivery, which I want to, again, caution against purely having meetings for information delivery. But in that part of the meeting, do you need people to then discuss this? Do you need a decision to be made, or do you need people to take action within that part of the meeting? And then you need to order these items or what you're going to do within this meeting appropriately. You don't want to have the things that are going to require the most team engagement to be later in your agenda, because people are going to, at that point, they start wandering away. They're already now going to start multitasking. You want to capture people early in order to have those more key items discussed early in that meeting. Another key point of meeting hygiene during the meeting itself, um, you need to fight against this FOMO and limit the number of attendees. If you are sitting in a meeting that you have called and you look around the room and you can't pinpoint what each person in that room, virtual or real, is specifically there to do, you have failed in inviting the appropriate number of attendees. And if you are sitting in a meeting wondering, why am I here? Then that's probably a meeting that you should not have attended in the first place. Within the meeting, you can have a variety of roles. You can designate people as timekeepers. You can designate people as devil's advocates to, if you're having a discussion, be that voice that always kind of is poking holes in what other people are saying. And you can have someone who also is designated as watching out and making sure that people are actually engaged. I highly encourage you, if you have recurring team meetings, to set ground rules. A lot of these ground rules are going to be around electronic devices. Many team meetings that I have, I encourage people and say, I need you to turn off your cell phones. I don't want you to be on your computers. Again, fighting against that multitasking, so people are going to actually attend to what is happening in the meeting. But then also setting the ground rules of how you are going to show up for each other as a team. Things like respecting the ideas of others, maintaining confidentiality. If you're going to show up, you're going to participate, and you're going to also come prepared, having read any pre-reads that are out there. You want to open with action, and you want to focus specifically on the tasks at hand. This old habit that I think refuses to die of let's review the old meeting minutes and approve them is not the way that you should start out a meeting. And please do not spend the first 10 minutes of a meeting reviewing what happened, taking 10 minutes to review in detail what happened at the prior meeting. Essentially, what you're doing there is you are rewarding the people that didn't show up for that prior meeting and penalizing people that consistently come to the meetings. I highly encourage interspersing silent time for people to do a little bit of work alone and then coming together again. I'll explain reasons behind that when I talk a little bit about the facilitation. You need to end the meeting with clarity and with future action items. And please, if you take meeting minutes, if you're letting your AI kind of co-pilot transcribe the meetings, do not send out meeting minutes that are 3 pages long. Your meeting minutes should be no longer than a half a page. So it should only take a matter of minutes for people that didn't make the meeting to be able to read those minutes. Virtual meetings, we know, literally a whole different animal. Shorter is even better for a virtual meeting. People have a shorter attention span virtually than they do in person. I encourage you to have even fewer participants, be more stringent with who needs to actually be at that meeting. Appearance actually is important. You should have cameras on so people can engage in these team meetings. And you need to be careful when you are joining these meetings. You don't want to have a super distracting background. You don't want to have people walking around behind you. And then you don't want to have a personal appearance that is actually quite distracting as well. So you need to show up in the right way for these meetings. People need to realize that eye contact is really important when you're in a team meeting. And instead of talking at your screen, which is really hard to not do, you should talk and make eye contact with the camera lens on your computer, because that's how you are essentially making eye contact with the people in the meeting. You need to have really a high degree of extra focus on making sure that you're including people meaningfully in these virtual meetings. So proactive facilitation and even having a tactic of cold calling people or going around the virtual room to make sure that people, again, are staying engaged in your meetings. So you've cut down as many meetings as you possibly can. The meetings and somewhat routine meetings that you have, you're having good meeting hygiene. You're putting your agenda items out. You are making sure that you have set those ground rules and that you have clear action items at the end. The third strategy that I want to talk about on how to improve what I would say are kind of your most important meetings and most complicated meetings is consider having someone else come in to run these meetings for you. And this is the reason why you want to have that extra person in there. Particularly when you're having meetings in which you're having facilitated and shared decision making with lots of voices around the table, and you need to have and grab these divergent viewpoints in order to then be able to make the best decision possible. This is the kind of the diamond kind of a layout of participation during a decision-making meeting. Ideally, you're starting out with that problem, and then you kind of get into this divergent phase where you want to try and get as many thoughts out there, get as much information out there as possible. Invariably, people will throw out one good idea, and then everyone's like, yep, we want to anchor on that, and we're done, which means you have left a lot of good information, a lot of good ideas on the table. And then you reach that middle portion of that diamond, which is this emergent phase where you're starting to try and navigate towards what are the best ideas out there and how are we incorporating all of these diverse perspectives and collaborating effectively. It's lovingly called the groan zone because it's really difficult to get through this and then reach that convergent phase and closure. I think Sam Kainer really summarized it well that people avoid the conflict and discomfort that is inherent within this collaborative emergent phase. And by avoiding that struggle and then not integrating one another's perspectives, members of these groups gently diminish their own potential to be effective. And this is why you need a facilitator. So what facilitators can do is they turn meetings that look increasingly like this to what they actually should be, which is a forum that actually, instead of promoting burnout, prevents burnout. It can start getting your team excited about possibilities and working together. In theory, and actually what it should be is meetings should let people return to what connects them to why they work. It connects them back to the team and connects them back to their purpose. It lets these superstar teams unlock their potential and solve problems, lets them make decisions, and then also take risks and innovate even faster. Now, facilitators do this not by being the heroes. They're not the ones coming up with the solutions themselves, but they are guiding these teams through this process. And they do it by managing the mess. They take away the messiness of the collaborative process itself and help the team embrace the messiness of collaboration. There's this fallacy that good collaboration is super easy. It's not hard work. Collaboration is always going to be hard work, and it's always going to feel a little bit difficult because you're opening up to possibilities and differences of opinions, and you're actually encouraging disagreement. That facilitator acts as a neutral party in those disagreements. They're not sitting there advocating for their own idea to be the quote unquote winning idea. And so, in that neutrality, they can moderate a lot of these disagreements that happen. They can cut through the clutter of irrelevant points that tend to be made and help teams pluck out those golden nuggets of what's important, which then helps lend clarity and helps people get out of that groan zone and continue to move forward to achieve their goals in that meeting. And the last thing they do is that they really ensure that that meeting ends with clear next steps. And that next step can't be we're just going to have another meeting about the same thing. And so you don't need a facilitator for every single meeting. Having the basics of facilitator type skills can help you run kind of typical meetings yourself. But you want to consider having an external facilitator come when it's really important, complex issues, when getting team buy-in is vital to that successful outcome. If you know that team dynamics are already kind of a bit complicated, facilitators can help cut through those existing complicated team dynamics. They are not going to fix your team culture or fix those team dynamics, but they'll help mitigate them in that process to still help you get and reach the conclusion that you need to. If you're kind of tackling something and bringing together a group of people that have widely divergent viewpoints, but you need to incorporate those widely divergent viewpoints for that effective solution, it's another area where facilitators can help you. And if you, as the team lead, need to fully engage in the content and be sitting at that table as a content expert and not be running and dealing with the messiness of the process, that's something a facilitator can take off your table. Now, facilitation and facilitators have specific mindsets, tool sets, and then it's based off of kind of a core model. The facilitation mindset is built off of four distinct things. They are hyper aware of what is going on in the room, whether virtual or in person. They are paying attention to not just what's said, but also what's not said. And then they key very closely into body language to then be aware of where people are and where specific, what kind of team dynamics are going on in these kind of decision-making forums. They need to be highly adaptable. Even if you think you can plan out exactly how a meeting's going to go and exactly what a team is going to do, I guarantee you it's never going to go that way. So you need to be able to adapt a bit on the fly. That facilitator, when the team is in that groan zone and everyone's sitting there being like, oh my God, now we're talking about the same things all over again. We're slugging through. I don't know, maybe we should just give up. We're never going to reach where we need to go. That facilitator needs to be that optimistic cheerleader of, hey, you know what, guys? This is exactly what collaboration is. Collaboration can feel messy. It can feel like you're not going to get where you're going to go. I promise you, we are going to get to where we need to go, and we're going to get the best ideas possible out there and make sure that a decision is made. The best facilitators, the ones that really can adapt on the fly, need to be unshakable. Doesn't matter if technology doesn't work. It doesn't matter if there's these really disruptive voices in the room. They are going to be unshakable and be that rock that that team can look to and hold on to guide them through that process. Now, the facilitation model is based off of insights into why meetings aren't run well and why collaboration is difficult. And so a lot of these insights are exactly what we just talked about in the beginning parts of this presentation. But then there's also core principles on how to facilitate a session, skills that each facilitator should have, and then a kind of a basic structure that you build off of, and activities that you can use in a plug and play mode to facilitate these sessions. So core principles for facilitation are that discussions need to be sequenced in a specific way. Discussions should be visualized. Getting those discussions visualized, prevents later on in the meeting people saying, wait, oh, I think we talked about this. Well, no, we didn't talk about that. If you visualize the discussions, it basically creates a visual timeline of what's already been done for the team to refer back to. But then it also is a way that each team member can literally see that their ideas and input have been heard. And then there's this concept of working alone together in different phases. This means that these kind of silent geniuses that you have that never speak up, that are kind of sitting there in the corner, that oftentimes have the best ideas, are not overshadowed by those people that speak all the time, speak for long periods of time, and kind of basically push down all of these other voices. And then that other core principle, and you'll see these themes throughout this presentation, is that there's always a decision at the end. The core skills that a good facilitator has is, again, maintaining that neutrality. It's not about you being the hero. It's not about you saying, this is the idea that I think is the best idea. It's about the team being wise and creating those wise decisions as to what they think the best idea is. Active listening and making sure that people know that they have been heard. This ability to ask good questions, open-ended questions that encourage people to think past that initial first idea and raise those good thoughts and kind of ideas that might not be evident from the beginning. It's also an ability to give super, super clear instructions. So essentially to act as that first grade teacher, telling people what to do to avoid the confusion that makes people disengage. They are going to manage that meeting time to make sure that team is moving forward and accomplishes their goals, but then also manages the energy in the room. You can calm down the energy in the room if things get a little bit heated. Acknowledge, hey, you know what, team? It sounds like emotions are high. That means people are very invested in the work. How about we take a 2-minute break for people to walk around and come back? But then you're also looking at the energy. When that energy flags, there's key ways that you can bring the energy of that team up so that they then re-engage in that process. And then another core skill is, again, dealing with these challenging people that can disrupt that collaborative process. Now, getting to the structure of what facilitators do and how they do it, it aligns and maps out very clearly with that kind of diamond process of participatory decision making. So in that divergent phase, facilitators are going to help and have activities where you collect all the ideas possible. In that growing zone where teams are trying to slog through and get to, well, what do we think are the best ideas out there and what should we do going forward? There's a create and choose phase. And then in that convergent phase, you're going to help guide the team to commit to an action. At the beginning and the end, you need to start strong, but then you need to end stronger because those are those key anchoring points and what people are going to remember more than anything else. There are some very foundational activities that facilitators use. There's something called a post-up. I'm sure many people in the audience are familiar with design thinking. This is a version of that. It's a way of surfacing those ideas, making them visible, and then using affinity mapping to categorize and create a subcategorization of those ideas to kind of start in getting people through that collect and then choose phase, which is oftentimes based off of a variety of ways of people literally voting for what those key ideas are to then get through that consolidation phase. And then helping them in that final phase of what are we going to choose and prioritize, making sure that you end up with here's the number 1, 2, and 3 things that we're going to do and commit to as a group. I've listed on the right-hand side a variety of basically exercises that facilitators can pull from to run teams through these kind of phases. Again, anyone that's interested in these things, more than happy to walk people through what these exercises are. They're pretty easy, and honestly, they are way more effective than what you would think for how easy they are to comprehend. And so in order to end this meeting with time for a kind of discussion, I want to now transition to thinking about what we've just talked about and learned. And I want to challenge you to do one small thing in the next 7 days to transform your meetings from a time sync for your team to a way that you can synchronize your team and create forums in which you capture and basically unlock your team's superpowers to be able to do things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do, get people excited about the work that they do and reconnect them to their why. So take a couple moments to think about one small thing that you're going to commit to doing in the next 7 days to accomplish this goal. And so I'm going to stop sharing here. And I'd love to hear people's thoughts and hear your questions. And thanks again for your listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Morgan. Obviously, from all the balloons and claps and hearts and a topic that look at that, it's very important to people. And thank you for your offer, which I would have expected you to say, knowing you that you would help people because I know how passionate you are about this. So we'll try to get as many as we can. We did have a question in the chat from Teresa about the pros and cons of having a facilitator belonging or having a stake in the group discussion.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Um, Having someone is for a meeting where that facilitator really needs to be deeply involved in the work itself. Having someone external come in can be really helpful. I think actually a large proportion of meetings can be facilitated by someone in the group. What I've started doing is I oftentimes will share with a colleague that if we're running the meeting together, we will kind of tag off back and forth of like, hey, you know what? Can you facilitate this one and I'll facilitate the next one to again allow team members to be able to engage as much as possible. That it also depends on your team dynamic. So it depends on what you want to do and then the existing team dynamics. If your team dynamics are maybe not quite as sound as what you'd want them to be, having someone come in that isn't day to day in the weeds with those somewhat strained team dynamics can be very, very helpful. I will say that as a facilitator, going in and when I facilitate, it's pretty clear early when I'm facilitating a team that might not have the best dynamics at a baseline. And when I'm not invested in those dynamics, I can do a much, much better job facilitating. Because honestly, I just don't have a stake in that game. And so I'm in there and I don't need to worry about what this means later on. I'm just invested in what happens in that part of the meeting. So that's where bringing in that external person can be very, very helpful for those tricky team dynamics.
Thank you. Not a question, but a comment and your ability to comment this. Neri says a comment on focus for the need for eye contact isn't great for embracing neurodiversity, and
Mhm.
some people aren't as good about eye contact. Any comment for that?
I think it's something that it's completely true and it feels you have to train yourself to do it, honestly. Because it feels unnatural to look at a lens, to look at a camera lens. Because even right now, I want to look at the people's faces on the screen. But that means I'm looking down. And so I'm not making eye contact with you. So it takes, you need to be quite intentional in training yourself how to do this. And, realizing that it is difficult to do. And even, realizing that it is difficult if you just call it out, to be honest with you, and gently prompt someone and say, hey, you know what? I can tell that you're looking at a screen off to your right. I enjoy having a conversation with you. Can we try and have a little bit more eye contact? Because no one's doing it intentionally. Although with that neurodiversity, it is a good point that if someone's uncomfortable doing it, then that's okay as well.
Thank you. And I think we're just maybe as a close, Andy says everyone needs to hear this so we can all benefit, agree, and lots of people agreed with Andy. Is it a fair statement to say, because you talked about the frustrations of, we try to do initiatives and or do it organizationally, maybe this is a personal philosophy. I am going to stop going to meetings I don't need to. I am
Yep.
going to do agendas. And we act as the example of what we want everyone, like starting local, so to speak.
Yeah, I think honestly that is absolutely the best way to go. It's funny. I learned in a meeting that Stanford Children's has a no meeting policy on Thursdays or some day of the week, and I was in a meeting on that day in the week. And so that just tells you what top down and what the limitations of top down are. And I think really this can be very effective in a bottom up framework. And if everyone kind of commits to doing this, then all of a sudden it's a groundswell. And that's where, like, for my team, I tell them that, like, you know what, I give them permission to hold me accountable. If I invite you to a meeting and I don't give you an agenda, I'm not going to hold it against you if you don't come. And I give them permission to not go to meetings where there's not an agenda. And then also hold myself accountable for, you know what? Do I actually need to have this meeting in the first place? And let people push back and say, you know what, can we do this by email instead? So I think I agree. I think this is actually much better as a grassroots than it is as a from an organizational endeavor.
Great. And in the interest, you praised me for getting this started on time. So I also want to end it on time. But some people are asking about the slides. I want to remind you these meetings are recorded. So if you go to the Stanford Medicine Center for Improvement website, you can watch the whole thing. You can have your leaders, your group. This is available. So please do share this with everyone. Thank you, everybody, for coming. This was, as promised, a great presentation. Thank you so much, Dr. Moga. And we look forward to seeing everybody in March. Have a
Yeah,
great rest of your
and feel
day.
free if people want the actual slides, just shoot me an email. I will give you the actual slide deck. There's lots of other slides that are hidden, and so you can have access to all those. And if anyone is interested in a facilitated session, like, I am more than happy to come to your groups and do this for free. It's super fun. And so it's one of the things I love doing.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much, Dr. Moga. And if you send me a copy of your slides, I can do a mass email to everybody that attended.
Oh, perfect. I'll do that right after we finish.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.